Why Buddhist philosophy makes sense. By a lifelong researcher in Buddhist philosophy. In my more than 40 years as a student and researcher of the world's wisdom traditions, I have navigated the complex currents of countless metaphysical systems, ethical frameworks, and soteriological paths. Yet, I find myself continually returning to the teachings of the Buddha with a renewed and deepened appreciation for their remarkable coherence, their psychological acuity, and their profound internal logic. In a world often fractured by dogma and unsubstantiated belief, Buddhist philosophy stands apart. It does not ask for blind faith, it invites investigation. It does not present a set of divine revelations to be accepted without question, it offers a map, a methodology, and a set of verifiable hypotheses about the nature of the human mind and the root of its suffering. The assertion that Buddhist philosophy makes sense is not a claim of its superiority over other traditions, nor is it an attempt at proselytization. Rather, it is an argument for its profound rationality. It makes sense in the way a brilliant physician's diagnosis makes sense. It accurately identifies the symptoms, logically deduces the cause, offers a clear prognosis, and prescribes a practical and effective course of treatment. It makes sense in the way a truly scientific theory makes sense. It is built on empirical observation. It is internally consistent, and its claims can be tested and verified through personal experience. Many in the West first encounter Buddhism through its more exotic cultural trappings, leading to the misconception that it is simply another belief system concerned with otherworldly matters. But when one peels back these outer layers, one discovers a pragmatic and penetrating science of mind that speaks directly to the core of the human condition. This article is an exploration of that rational core. We will journey through the logical structure of its foundational teachings, from the diagnostic clarity of the Four Noble Truths to the radical psychological insights of the non-self doctrine. We will examine its coherent model of causality, its empirical approach to mental training, and its profound alignment with many of the discoveries of modern neuroscience and psychology. This is an invitation to see Buddhism not as a religion to be believed, but as a philosophy to be understood and a practice to be explored, a timelessly relevant system that, when examined closely, simply and profoundly makes sense. The foundation, an empirical and pragmatic approach. Before delving into the specific doctrines, it is essential to understand the very ground upon which the entire edifice of Buddhist thought is built, a commitment to pragmatism and empirical investigation. The Buddha was not a metaphysician speculating on the ultimate origins of the cosmos or the nature of a supreme being. In fact, he famously set aside such questions as unanswerable and unhelpful to the core task at hand, the alleviation of suffering. His approach is perfectly encapsulated in the parable of the poisoned arrow. The Buddha tells of a man shot with a poisoned arrow whose friends and family rush to find a surgeon. The wounded man, however, refuses treatment until he knows the name of the man who shot him, his caste, his village, where the bow was made, what kind of wood it was, and what kind of feathers were on the arrow. The Buddha's point is devastatingly clear. The man would die before his intellectual curiosity was satisfied. The pragmatic and urgent task is to remove the arrow and treat the wound. This is the spirit of the entire Buddhist project. The Buddha's teachings are offered not as absolute truths to be worshipped, but as practical tools to be used for a specific purpose. He famously compared his teachings to a raft, built for the purpose of crossing a river of suffering to the far shore of liberation. Once one has reached the other shore, he said, one does not carry the raft around on one's back, one leaves it behind. This instrumental view of doctrine is radically pragmatic and anti-dogmatic. Furthermore, the Buddha's method was empirical. His famous injunction, found in the Kalama Sutta, is a charter for free inquiry. He advised the Kalamas not to believe in anything simply because it is found in scriptures, because it is part of a tradition, or because it is taught by a charismatic teacher. Instead, he said, when you know for yourselves that certain things are unwholesome and wrong, then give them up, and when you know for yourselves that certain things are wholesome and good, then accept them and follow them. This principle of ehipassiko, a Pali term meaning, come and see for yourself, is a recurring invitation throughout the teachings. The truth of the Dharma is not something to be taken on faith alone. It is to be tested and verified in the laboratory of one's own direct experience. This empirical, results-oriented, and non-dogmatic foundation is the first reason why Buddhist philosophy makes such compelling sense in our modern, scientifically minded age. The logical core. The Four Noble Truths as a rational framework. At the heart of the Buddha's first sermon lies the elegant and powerful structure of the Four Noble Truths. As mentioned earlier, this framework is not a set of depressing proclamations, but a logical, problem-solving methodology that mirrors the ancient medical model of diagnosis, etiology, prognosis, and treatment. 1. The diagnosis. The truth of dukkha, the problem is identified. The first truth is the clear-eyed and honest acknowledgement of a fundamental problem, dukkha. Often translated as suffering. Its meaning is more accurately, unsatisfactoriness or dis-ease. It encompasses the obvious physical and emotional pain of life, dukkha. The stress that comes from the fact that even our pleasant experiences are fleeting, viparinama dukkha. And the pervasive, background anxiety of our conditioned existence, sankhara dukkha. This is not a pessimistic judgment, it is a realistic starting point. Any credible system for human flourishing must first have an accurate and honest assessment of the problem it aims to solve. By starting here, the Buddha grounds his entire philosophy in a universally recognizable human experience, making it immediately relevant and relatable. It makes sense because it starts with a reality we all know. 2. The etiology. The truth of samudaya, the cause is diagnosed. A diagnosis is of limited use without an understanding of its cause. The second truth identifies the origin, samudaya, of our dis-ease as tanha, thirst, or craving. This is a profound psychological insight. The Buddha argues that our suffering does not come from the world itself, but from our mind's reaction to the world. It is our relentless grasping at pleasant experiences, our violent aversion to unpleasant ones, and our fundamental ignorance of the nature of reality that fuels our discontent. This places the cause of suffering squarely within our own minds, which is a deeply empowering move. If the cause were external, an unjust world or a capricious God, we would be helpless victims. But because the cause is an internal, conditioned habit of the mind, it becomes something we can work with and change. This causal analysis makes sense because it provides a logical and psychologically plausible explanation for our inner turmoil. 3. The prognosis. The truth of nirodha. The possibility of a cure is confirmed. Having identified the cause, the physician can now offer a prognosis. The third truth states that there is a cessation, nirodha, of suffering. If craving is the cause of suffering, then the complete cessation of craving must be its end. This is a simple and impeccable logical inference. It follows directly from the second truth. This state of cessation is known as nirvana, the extinguishing of the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion. This truth provides the essential element of hope, confirming that the problem is not a terminal condition. It makes sense because it offers a logical possibility of resolution based on the preceding analysis. 4. The prescription. The truth of magga, a practical treatment is prescribed. Finally, the Buddha prescribes the course of treatment, the Noble Eightfold Path. This is a comprehensive and practical guide to life, encompassing ethical conduct, sila, mental discipline, samadhi, and wisdom, prajna. It is a set of 8 interconnected practices, including right understanding, right intention, right speech, right action, right mindfulness, and right concentration, that work synergistically to eradicate the cause of suffering. The path is the practical, how-to manual for achieving the cessation promised in the third truth. It makes sense because it does not leave the practitioner with a vague aspiration, but provides a clear, detailed, and systematic methodology for achieving the goal. This 4-part structure is a masterpiece of rational and pragmatic thought. It is a complete and coherent system for understanding and resolving the fundamental problem of human dissatisfaction. The psychology of non-self, anatta, a more coherent model of mind. Perhaps the most radical and challenging, yet most logically coherent, of the Buddha's teachings is the doctrine of anatta, or non-self. All other major philosophical and religious systems of his time posited an Atman, a permanent, unchanging, essential self or soul at the core of our being. The Buddha, through empirical investigation of his own experience, declared that no such entity could be found. This is not a nihilistic claim that we don't exist. It is a precise description of how we exist, not as a solid, static noun, but as a dynamic, flowing verb. The self is not a thing, but a process. The Buddha analyzed the person into 5 aggregates: skandhas, form, the body; feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness, and showed that each of them is impermanent, anicca, and in a constant state of flux. To identify with any of these changing processes as a permanent I is the fundamental error that leads to suffering. Why this makes sense? It aligns with our direct experience. When we actually look for this solid self, where is it? Is it in our thoughts? They are constantly changing. Is it in our feelings? They are notoriously fickle. Is it our body? It is aging and changing with every moment. The idea of a self is a conceptual overlay on a dynamic stream of experience. The anatta doctrine simply describes this stream without the unnecessary and unprovable assumption of a static I, who is the owner of the stream. It solves philosophical problems. The concept of a permanent self creates numerous philosophical paradoxes, the ship of Theseus being a classic example. If the self is permanent and unchanging, how can it learn, grow, or change its mind? If it is separate from the body and mind, how does it interact with them? The anatta model of the self as an emergent, conditioned process avoids these problems entirely. It is consistent with modern neuroscience and psychology. Modern cognitive science has largely failed to find any single, centralized, command center in the brain corresponding to a self. Instead, consciousness and identity are seen as emergent properties of complex, decentralized neural processes. Neuroscientist Francisco Varela described the self as a virtual executive, an emergent pattern, not a fixed entity. This aligns remarkably well with the 2.600-year-old Buddhist model of the self as a conditioned and impermanent collection of aggregates. Similarly, the bundle theory of self, proposed by philosophers like David Hume, which sees the self as a bundle of perceptions, is a near-perfect echo of the Buddhist view. The anatta doctrine makes profound psychological sense. It explains why we suffer. We are desperately trying to protect and gratify a fictional entity. Our pride, our shame, our anger when insulted, our fear of annihilation, all are rooted in this mistaken identification. By deconstructing this illusion, the path provides a direct route to dismantling the very root of our deepest anxieties. The coherence of causality, dependent origination and karma. Underpinning the entire Buddhist worldview is a sophisticated and coherent theory of causality, known as paticcasamuppada, or dependent origination. This is the middle way that avoids the extremes of eternalism, the belief in a permanent, unchanging reality, and nihilism, the belief in random, meaningless annihilation. The principle is elegantly simple. When this is, that is. From the arising of this, that arises. When this is not, that is not. From the ceasing of this, that ceases. Nothing exists in isolation. Everything arises in dependence upon a web of causes and conditions. This applies to the entire universe. But its most important application is in explaining the arising of suffering. The Buddha traced the chain of causation that leads to suffering, starting from ignorance, which leads to mental formations, which leads to consciousness, and so on, through a 12-link chain that culminates in aging and death. Why this makes sense? This model provides a rational, naturalistic explanation for our experience without resorting to supernatural or deterministic forces. It shows precisely how our suffering is constructed, moment by moment, through a chain of conditioned mental processes. More importantly, because it is a conditional process, it can be undone. By breaking the chain at its weakest link, by replacing ignorance with wisdom, the entire cascade of suffering can be brought to a halt. This provides the logical foundation for the efficacy of the Noble Eightfold Path. Within this framework of causality lies the principle of karma, Sanskrit, or kama, Pali. Stripped of popular misconceptions, karma is not a system of cosmic justice meted out by a divine judge. It is simply the law of ethical causality. The word itself means action or deed, but the Buddha clarified that the most important element is sadhana, or intention. Wholesome intentions, rooted in kindness, clarity, and generosity, lead to wholesome actions, which plant the seeds for future happiness and peace. Unwholesome intentions, rooted in greed, hatred, and delusion, lead to unwholesome actions, which plant the seeds for future suffering. This is not a metaphysical punishment, it is a natural and observable psychological process. A mind habituated to anger creates a world of conflict. A mind habituated to kindness creates a world of connection and warmth. Karma makes sense because it is a rational theory of moral and psychological accountability. It posits that our choices matter and that we are the primary architects of our own experience. The empirical proof. Meditation is a verifiable tool for insight. Finally, Buddhist philosophy makes sense because it is not merely a system to be thought about, but a set of practices to be done. The primary practice is meditation, bhavana, which serves as the empirical laboratory for verifying the truths of the Dharma. Meditation in the Buddhist context is not about blissful trances or escaping from reality. It is a rigorous training in attention and awareness. Practices like mindfulness of breathing, anapanasati, cultivate concentration and stability of mind, samadhi. Practices like vipassana, insight meditation, use this stable platform of awareness to investigate the nature of experience directly. Why this makes sense? Through meditation, the philosophical teachings cease to be abstract concepts and become lived realities. The meditator directly observes impermanence, anicca, by watching thoughts and sensations arise and pass away. Moment by moment, they directly experience unsatisfactoriness, dukkha, by noticing the mind's restlessness and its subtle reactions of craving and aversion. They directly investigate non-self, anatta, by looking for a thinker behind the thoughts or a feeler behind the feelings and finding only the processes themselves. This empirical validation is where the system becomes truly coherent. The philosophy provides the map, and meditation is the journey that proves the map is accurate. Furthermore, in recent decades, modern neuroscience has begun to provide remarkable corroboration for the effects of these ancient practices. Studies using fMRI and EEG have shown that long-term meditation can physically alter the structure and function of the brain. It has been shown to strengthen the prefrontal cortex, which is associated with attention and executive control, reduce the size and reactivity of the amygdala, the brain's fear center, increase activity in brain regions associated with empathy and compassion, enhance emotional regulation and reduce stress markers. This growing body of scientific evidence demonstrates that the practices prescribed by the Buddha 2.600 years ago are not based on wishful thinking, but are reliable and effective techniques for transforming the mind. This alignment with modern science is a powerful testament to the rational and empirical nature of the Buddhist path. Conclusion. A coherent path to human flourishing. To ask why Buddhist philosophy makes sense is to ask why a key fits a lock. It makes sense because it accurately describes the problem of the human condition and offers a practical, coherent, and verifiable means of solving it. It is a system free from the need for dogma, grounded in a call for direct, personal inquiry. Its foundational framework, the Four Noble Truths, provides a logical and psychologically astute model for understanding and ending our inner turmoil. Its core insight, the doctrine of non-self, offers a model of the mind that is more consistent with our lived experience and with modern science than the traditional notion of a fixed and permanent soul. Its theory of causality, embodied in dependent origination and karma, presents a rational and empowering view of our place in the world, making us the authors of our own destiny. And its central methodology, the practice of meditation, provides a reliable and verifiable means of transforming the abstract philosophy into a living, breathing reality, a reality that is increasingly being validated by contemporary neuroscience. Buddhist philosophy is not about escaping from the world, but about seeing it, and ourselves, with a radical clarity. It is this clarity that liberates. It is a path that honors both the heart and the mind, cultivating boundless compassion through a lens of penetrating, rational inquiry. It is for these reasons, its pragmatism, its psychological depth, its logical consistency, and its empirical testability, that the Dharma has not only endured for over 2.5 millennia but continues to resonate with profound and compelling sense today.